Title: Chilling Colorado Cabin. Newlyweds. Vanish. Forestry officials find secret cellar. Months later. Description: When newlyweds Jake and Emma disappeared from their remote Colorado honeymoon cabin, investigators found no trace until a fallen tree revealed a hidden underground bunker months later. What forestry officials discovered beneath the mountain would expose a 40-year killing spree and solve one of America's most chilling serial killer cases. The truth about what happened in that cabin will shock you. Who do you think was responsible? Comment your theories below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more spine-chilling true crime on shocking stories. Chilling Colorado Cabin. Newlyweds vanish. Forestry officials find secret cellar months later. Imagine planning the perfect honeymoon getaway in the breathtaking Colorado Rockies only to vanish without a trace from your secluded mountain cabin. Now imagine that months later, when forestry officials are conducting routine inspections, they discover a hidden underground cellar beneath your property that no one knew existed. What they find down there will rewrite everything investigators thought they knew about your disappearance and expose secrets that had been buried for decades. Welcome back to Shocking Stories, where we uncover the most chilling true crime mysteries that will leave you questioning everything. I'm your host, and today's story takes us deep into the Colorado wilderness, where love, betrayal, and murder collide in ways you never could have imagined. If you're ready for a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to like this video and subscribe with notifications on, because this mountain mystery has more twists than the winding roads that lead to its shocking conclusion. September 15th, 2024 was supposed to be the beginning of forever for Jake Morrison and Emma Sullivan. The 28-year-old software developer and 26-year-old graphic designer had met 3 years earlier at a coffee shop in Denver, and their whirlwind romance had culminated in a beautiful wedding ceremony surrounded by family and friends just 1 week prior. For their honeymoon, they chose a remote cabin in the San Juan National Forest, about 40 miles southwest of Durango, Colorado. A place where they could disconnect from the world and focus entirely on each other. The cabin they rented through a vacation rental website was everything they had dreamed of. A rustic log structure built in the 1970s, nestled among towering pines and aspens, with a wraparound deck that offered stunning views of the surrounding peaks. The property sat on 5 acres of private land, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that wound through the forest for nearly 2 miles from the main highway. It was the perfect place for a couple to start their new life together in complete privacy and tranquility. Jake and Emma had planned every detail of their honeymoon week meticulously. They brought enough food and supplies to last the entire stay, planning to spend their days hiking the nearby trails, fishing in the crystal-clear mountain streams, and their evenings cooking together and stargazing from the hot tub on the deck. Emma had even packed a special bottle of champagne they had been saving since their engagement, planning to open it on their final night to toast to their future together. The couple arrived at the cabin on Sunday afternoon, September 15th, and immediately fell in love with the property. Emma posted a photo on her Instagram account showing her and Jake standing on the deck with the mountains in the background, captioned, "Honeymoon Paradise, a week of pure bliss ahead with my amazing husband." It would be her final social media post. According to the timeline investigators later reconstructed, Jake and Emma spent their first few days at the cabin exactly as planned. They hiked to a nearby waterfall on Monday, spent Tuesday exploring the old mining trails that crisscrossed the area, and Wednesday was devoted to a lazy day of reading and relaxing by the cabin's stone fireplace. Emma had been keeping a honeymoon journal, documenting their adventures and her feelings about starting married life, and her entries from those first few days painted a picture of pure happiness. "Jake surprised me with breakfast in bed this morning," she wrote on Tuesday. "Pancakes shaped like hearts and coffee that actually tasted good despite being made on a camp stove. I can't believe how lucky I am to have found someone who makes even the simplest moments feel magical. This cabin feels like our own little world where nothing can touch us." But something changed on Thursday, September 19th. Emma's journal entries became shorter and more cryptic. Strange noises outside last night, she wrote. Jake says it's just wildlife, but it sounded like footsteps, probably just my imagination, but I can't shake the feeling that we're being watched. Her final entry, dated Friday morning, September 20th, was just one line. Jake went to get firewood. Something's not right here. That was the last anyone heard from Jake Morrison and Emma Sullivan. The couple had told their families they would be completely off-grid during their honeymoon, so no one was immediately concerned when they didn't respond to calls or texts. It wasn't until the following Sunday, September 22nd, when they failed to check out of the cabin as scheduled, that alarm bells began to ring. The property management company sent a caretaker to check on the cabin, and what he found launched one of the largest missing persons investigations in Colorado history. The cabin appeared to have been abandoned in haste. The front door was standing wide open despite the cool mountain temperatures. Inside, investigators found signs of a struggle: overturned furniture in the living room, broken dishes in the kitchen, and what appeared to be blood spatter on the walls near the fireplace. Jake and Emma's suitcases were still in the bedroom, their clothes neatly folded and their personal belongings undisturbed. Most puzzling of all, their rental car was still parked outside, keys on the kitchen counter, with no signs that they had attempted to leave the property. The Rio Grande County Sheriff's Office responded immediately, followed by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation and FBI agents from the Denver field office. The remote location and potential for foul play meant that this case received top priority from the start. Agent Patricia Chen, who specialized in missing persons cases in wilderness areas, took charge of the investigation. The scene at the cabin told a story of violence, but it was incomplete, Agent Chen later explained to reporters. We had clear evidence that something terrible had happened to Jake and Emma, but we had no idea what that something was, or where they might be now. The search effort was massive and immediate. Over 200 volunteers joined professional search and rescue teams in combing the rugged terrain surrounding the cabin. Helicopters with thermal imaging cameras swept the area for any sign of the missing couple. Bloodhounds tracked scents that led into the forest, but seemed to vanish after about half a mile, as if Jake and Emma had simply disappeared into thin air. The investigation quickly focused on the possibility that the couple had encountered someone else in the remote area, perhaps a transient living in the forest, or someone involved in illegal activities who saw them as a threat. The San Juan National Forest was known to be used by drug smugglers, moving product from Mexico to Denver, and investigators theorized that Jake and Emma might have stumbled upon an operation and been eliminated as witnesses. But as days turned into weeks with no sign of the couple, the case began to take on an eerie quality that unsettled even experienced investigators. The cabin itself seemed to hold secrets that no one could unlock. Built in 1974 by a reclusive millionaire named Harold Blackwood, the property had changed hands several times over the decades, and each previous owner had reported strange occurrences, unexplained noises, the feeling of being watched, and a general sense of unease that seemed to permeate the property. Harold Blackwood himself had disappeared in 1981, 7 years after building the cabin. His body was never found, and his disappearance was eventually ruled a probable suicide, though some locals suspected foul play. The property sat empty for nearly a decade before being sold to a developer who converted it into a vacation rental. But even then, guests frequently reported feeling uncomfortable and cutting their stays short. "There's something about that place that just feels wrong," said Maria Santos, a local real estate agent who had shown the property to potential buyers over the years. "I've been in hundreds of mountain cabins, but this one is different. It's like the forest itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen." As the investigation continued, more disturbing details emerged about the cabin's history. Property records showed that 3 other people had gone missing from the area over the past 40 years, all within a 5-mile radius of the Blackwood cabin. None of those cases had ever been solved, and until Jake and Emma's disappearance, no one had connected them. The FBI brought in specialists in geographic profiling and cold case analysis to examine the possibility that a serial killer had been operating in the area for decades. The profile they developed suggested someone with intimate knowledge of the terrain, possibly a local resident or someone who spent significant time in the forest. But despite extensive interviews with area residents and a thorough background check on everyone who had access to the cabin, no viable suspects emerged. 3 months after Jake and Emma's disappearance, the active search was scaled back, though the case remained open and investigators continued to follow up on tips and leads. The couple's families held on to hope that they might still be alive, perhaps being held captive somewhere. But as winter set in and the Colorado mountains became even more inhospitable, that hope began to fade. The cabin was sealed as a crime scene and remained empty through the harsh winter months. Snow piled up around the property, and the access road became impassable except by snowmobile. It seemed like the mountain wilderness had swallowed Jake and Emma Morrison Sullivan without a trace, and their fate would remain forever unknown. But the mountain was keeping secrets that would soon come to light in the most unexpected way. What do you think happened to Jake and Emma? Were they victims of a random crime, or was there something more sinister at work in those Colorado woods? Share your theories in the comments, because the truth is more shocking than anyone could have imagined. March 8, 2025, dawned clear and cold in the San Juan National Forest. The winter had been particularly harsh, with record snowfall that had kept the remote areas of the forest inaccessible for months. As spring began to arrive and the snow started to melt, the U.S. Forest Service began its annual inspections of properties within the national forest boundaries, checking for winter damage and ensuring that private landowners were maintaining their properties according to federal regulations. Forest Service Inspector Tom Rodriguez had been working in the San Juan National Forest for over 15 years, and he thought he had seen everything the mountain wilderness could throw at him. But when he arrived at the former Blackwood property to conduct his routine inspection, he discovered something that would reopen one of Colorado's most baffling missing persons cases and expose secrets that had been hidden for decades. Tom's inspection was supposed to be straightforward: check the cabin for structural damage from the heavy snow load, ensure that the septic system hadn't been compromised by freeze-thaw cycles, and verify that the property was being maintained according to Forest Service standards. The cabin had been sealed as a crime scene since the Morrison Sullivan disappearance, but the FBI had cleared the Forest Service to conduct necessary inspections. As Tom walked around the property, he noticed something unusual near the tree line behind the cabin. The heavy snows had caused several large pine trees to fall, and one massive tree had crashed down near what appeared to be a small utility shed that he had never noticed in previous inspections. When he went to examine the damage, he realized that the fallen tree had actually revealed something that had been carefully concealed. At first, I thought it was just a root cellar, or maybe an old septic tank, Tom later told investigators. But when I looked closer, I could see that this was something much more elaborate. There was a concrete entrance with steel doors, and it looked like it had been deliberately hidden under a layer of soil and vegetation. Tom immediately contacted his supervisor, who in turn notified the Rio Grande County Sheriff's Office. Within hours, the property was once again swarming with law enforcement officers, FBI agents, and forensic specialists. Agent Patricia Chen, who had never stopped thinking about the Morrison Sullivan case, rushed to the scene as soon as she received the call. What they found beneath the Colorado forest floor would shock even the most experienced investigators. The fallen tree had revealed the entrance to an elaborate underground bunker system that extended deep into the mountainside. The entrance was secured with heavy steel doors that showed signs of recent use, despite being carefully camouflaged from above. This wasn't some old mining tunnel or natural cave, Agent Chen explained to the assembled team. This was a sophisticated underground facility that someone had spent considerable time and money constructing, and based on the condition of the entrance, someone had been using it recently. The decision to enter the underground complex was not made lightly. The FBI's tactical team was called in to ensure the area was safe, and specialized equipment was brought in to provide lighting and ventilation for what could be an extensive underground exploration. As the team prepared to descend into the hidden bunker, no one could have predicted what they would find in the darkness below. The entrance led to a narrow concrete stairway that descended about 20 feet into the mountainside. At the bottom of the stairs was a heavy steel door with multiple locks, but the door was standing open, as if someone had left in a hurry. Beyond the door, the team found themselves in a corridor that extended deep into the mountain, with multiple rooms branching off on either side. The first room they entered appeared to be a living area, furnished with basic furniture and equipped with a generator for electricity. The air was stale but breathable, and there were signs that someone had been living in the space recently. Food containers, clothing, and personal items scattered throughout. But it was what they found in the next room that made Agent Chen's blood run cold. The second room was set up as a monitoring station with multiple computer screens, surveillance equipment, and what appeared to be a sophisticated communication system. The walls were covered with photographs, maps, and detailed notes about the cabin above and its various occupants over the years. Most disturbing of all were the dozens of photographs of Jake and Emma Morrison Sullivan, taken during their honeymoon week without their knowledge. Someone had been watching them, Agent Chen said, her voice tight with emotion. These photos showed Jake and Emma hiking, cooking, relaxing on the deck, intimate moments that should have been private. Whoever was living down here had been stalking them from the moment they arrived. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. In the third room, investigators found what could only be described as a prison. The room contained two small cells, each equipped with a cot, a bucket, and heavy chains attached to the walls. The cells showed clear signs of recent use, and forensic analysis would later confirm the presence of DNA from both Jake and Emma. The fourth and final room was the most disturbing of all. It appeared to be a workshop, equipped with tools, chemicals, and equipment that suggested someone had been disposing of evidence or bodies. The room contained a large industrial freezer, and when investigators opened it, they found the remains of Jake Morrison and Emma Sullivan, along with what appeared to be the remains of several other individuals. The discovery sent shockwaves through the law enforcement community and the families of the missing couple. Jake and Emma had not simply vanished into the wilderness, they had been kidnapped, held captive in an underground prison, and ultimately murdered by someone who had been living beneath their honeymoon cabin like a spider in its web. But who was responsible for this elaborate and horrifying crime? The underground bunker contained no obvious clues to the identity of its occupant, and despite extensive forensic analysis, investigators found no fingerprints or DNA evidence that could lead them to a suspect. Whoever had constructed this underground lair was careful, methodical, and had managed to operate undetected for what appeared to be decades. The investigation took on new urgency as FBI behavioral analysts developed a profile of the suspect. They were looking for someone with extensive construction and engineering knowledge, someone who had been familiar with the property for many years, and someone who had the financial resources to construct such an elaborate underground facility. Most importantly, they were looking for someone who had been able to move freely in the area without arousing suspicion. The answer to the mystery would come from an unexpected source and would reveal a truth so shocking that it would change everything investigators thought they knew about the case. Make sure you're subscribed to Shocking Stories, because the final part of this investigation will expose a killer who had been hiding in plain sight for over 40 years. The breakthrough in the Morrison-Sullivan case came from a source no one expected: Harold Blackwood himself. The millionaire who had supposedly disappeared in 1981 and was presumed dead had actually been living beneath his own property for over 40 years, constructing an elaborate underground empire and preying on anyone unfortunate enough to stay in the cabin above. The revelation began when forensic genealogist Dr. Sarah Martinez was brought in to analyze DNA evidence found throughout the underground bunker. Using advanced genetic sequencing techniques, she was able to develop a profile of the suspect and compare it against existing databases. What she found sent shockwaves through the investigation team. The DNA profile matched samples we had on file from Harold Blackwood's personal effects, which had been preserved when he was declared missing in 1981, Dr. Martinez explained to Agent Chen. But that should have been impossible because Harold Blackwood was supposed to be dead. The truth was far more sinister than anyone had imagined. Harold Blackwood had never disappeared. He had simply gone underground, literally. In 1981, facing mounting debts and potential criminal charges for financial fraud, Blackwood had faked his own death and retreated to the elaborate bunker system he had been secretly constructing beneath his property since the mid-1970s. The underground complex was far more extensive than investigators had initially realized. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a network of tunnels and chambers that extended nearly 200 feet into the mountainside, with multiple levels and sophisticated ventilation and electrical systems. Blackwood had spent years and hundreds of thousands of dollars creating what amounted to a self-sufficient underground city, complete with food storage, water filtration, and even a small workshop where he could manufacture the tools and equipment he needed for his crimes. But Blackwood hadn't retreated underground to simply hide from his creditors. The bunker system had been designed from the beginning as a base of operations for his true passion, hunting human beings. The monitoring equipment found in the bunker included not just surveillance cameras focused on the cabin above, but an extensive network of motion sensors, infrared cameras, and listening devices that covered nearly 50 acres of the surrounding forest. Blackwood had turned the entire area into his personal hunting preserve, Agent Chen explained to the task force that had been assembled to investigate the case. He could track anyone who entered his territory, study their movements and habits, and strike when they were most vulnerable. The investigation into Blackwood's activities revealed a pattern of predation that spanned over 4 decades. Using property records, missing persons reports, and forensic evidence from the underground bunker, investigators were able to connect Blackwood to at least 12 disappearances in the area, dating back to 1978. His victims included hikers, campers, hunters, and anyone else who had the misfortune to venture into his territory alone or in small groups. Blackwood's method was always the same. He would monitor his victims for days or weeks, learning their routines and identifying their vulnerabilities. Then he would strike, usually at night, using tranquilizer darts fired from a modified crossbow to incapacitate his prey. The victims would be dragged into the underground bunker, where Blackwood would keep them alive for days or weeks, subjecting them to psychological torture before eventually killing them. The forensic analysis of the underground complex revealed the full scope of Blackwood's crimes. The industrial freezer contained the remains of 8 individuals, including Jake and Emma Morrison Sullivan. DNA analysis identified most of the victims as people who had been reported missing over the past 20 years, including 2 college students who had disappeared while hiking in 2019, a family of 3 who had vanished during a camping trip in 2021, and a solo hiker who had been missing since 2022. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery was Blackwood's detailed journals, which documented his crimes with clinical precision. The journals revealed that Blackwood viewed his victims not as human beings, but as specimens to be studied and experimented upon. He had developed elaborate psychological profiles of each victim, documenting their fears, their breaking points, and their final moments with the detached curiosity of a scientist studying lab rats. Reading those journals was one of the most disturbing experiences of my career, Agent Chen later told reporters. Blackwood wrote about torture and murder the way most people write about their daily commute. There was no emotion, no remorse, just a cold, clinical documentation of human suffering. The manhunt for Harold Blackwood began immediately, but investigators quickly realized they were dealing with someone who had spent decades perfecting the art of remaining hidden. Blackwood knew every inch of the San Juan National Forest, had multiple escape routes planned, and had stockpiled enough supplies to survive in the wilderness for months or even years. The search effort involved over 300 law enforcement officers from multiple agencies, including FBI tactical teams, U.S. Marshals, and specialized wilderness tracking units. Helicopters with thermal imaging cameras swept the forest, while ground teams followed every trail and searched every cave and abandoned structure in a 50-mile radius around the cabin. The breakthrough came 3 weeks into the manhunt, when a Forest Service fire lookout spotted smoke rising from a remote area about 15 miles north of the Blackwood property. When tactical teams reached the location, they found Blackwood's final campsite, and Harold Blackwood himself, dead from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. Beside Blackwood's body, investigators found a final journal entry that provided a chilling glimpse into the mind of a serial killer who had operated undetected for over 40 years. "They found my sanctuary," he had written in his neat, precise handwriting. 43 years of perfect hunting, and it's over because of a fallen tree. The irony is not lost on me. I built my empire in the mountains, and the mountains have finally claimed me. The death of Harold Blackwood brought an end to one of the longest-running serial killing sprees in American history. But it also raised disturbing questions about how he had managed to operate undetected for so long. The investigation revealed multiple failures in the system: missing persons reports that were never properly investigated, jurisdictional disputes that allowed cases to fall through the cracks, and a general assumption that people who disappeared in the wilderness had simply gotten lost or fallen victim to natural hazards. The families of Blackwood's victims finally had answers, but those answers came at a terrible cost. Jake Morrison and Emma Sullivan had been tortured and killed during what should have been the happiest week of their lives. The other victims, hikers, campers, and outdoor enthusiasts who had simply wanted to enjoy the beauty of the Colorado wilderness, had died horrible deaths at the hands of a monster who had turned their paradise into his personal hunting ground. The Blackwood property was permanently closed to the public and designated as a memorial site for the victims. The underground bunker system was sealed and filled with concrete, ensuring that it could never again be used as a base for such horrific crimes. The cabin above was demolished, and the land was returned to its natural state. The case of Harold Blackwood and his underground empire serves as a chilling reminder that evil can hide anywhere, even in the most beautiful and seemingly peaceful places. It also highlights the importance of taking missing persons cases seriously, regardless of where they occur or how they might appear on the surface. As we close this chapter of shocking stories, we remember Jake Morrison and Emma Sullivan not as victims, but as a young couple who were deeply in love and excited about their future together. Their story is a tragedy, but it also led to the exposure of one of America's most prolific serial killers and brought justice for dozens of families who had been searching for answers for decades. What lessons can we learn from this horrific case? How can we better protect people who venture into remote wilderness areas? And how can we ensure that monsters like Harold Blackwood are caught before they can claim so many innocent lives? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to Shocking Stories for more true crime cases that reveal both the darkest depths of human evil and the dedication of those who fight to bring justice to the victims. Remember, even in the most beautiful places on earth, danger can lurk just beneath the surface. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and never forget that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance against those who would prey upon the innocent.